Hello and welcome to today's Fintech Finance Virtual. And today we're actually going to be talking about customer experience in the time of COVID-19. Now, we're going to be having a masterclass learning about how you can maintain that customer experience, especially in financial services, during the pandemic. Now, to our panelists, thank you very much for joining us, guys. Can I actually get you guys to introduce yourselves and your organization? So, Stuart, can I start with you, please?
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me along today. I'm Stuart Dorman. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Sabio. So Sabio is a tech company focused on the customer experience sector. We help our clients to deliver great customer experiences across Webb and into the contact centres by using cutting edge technology. My role is to look after our AI and emerging tech practice. So I'm really interested in sort of the newer technologies that are driving forward customer service in the industry.
Brilliant. I'm really excited to get your input because of just how crazy the whole situation has become, even in the last couple of days. So thank you very much, Stu. And Barry, could I also get you to introduce yourself to our viewers too, please?
Yeah, of course. Hi, Doug, and thanks for having me along. My name's Barry Webb. I am responsible for contact centre technology strategy here at BGL Group. BGL Group perhaps aren't massively well known as a brand, but we're responsible for some of the largest insurance brand providers in the UK. Within the contact centre area that I'm responsible for, we manage insurance products for around 3 million customers.
Wow. Okay, brilliant. Well, guys, thank you very much for that. So to start, I think it's best if we look at how customer experience has changed within insurance in the years leading up to the pandemic. So, Stuart, could I get your perspective on this? Was insurance effectively slower to adapt to the changing customer demands compared to the rest of financial services?
I think from our perspective, the insurance sector has been well on its way to digitising its experiences for many, many years now. And I think the big challenge really has been customers choosing to engage with their insurers using digital channels, wanting to go to the portals to access the documentation, log, claims, etc. So I think that's really been the challenge. I think the insurance industry itself has been trying to push customers down that route. And I think what we've seen more in recent years is actually looking at digitisation and going to where the customers are going, which means thinking about applying digital strategies on the voice channel, thinking about applying digital strategies through conversational AI technologies on web channels, and actually looking to digitise where the customers are going themselves. So I think that's definitely been a recent trend that we've seen across the insurance sector, and I know that the guys at BGL are doing a great job here.
Brilliant. Well, with that in mind, Barry, could I also get your input as well in terms of that change over the last couple of years before 2020, that digitization route? How was that for you guys?
I think it's certainly fair to say that, as a whole, the industry has been behind the curve over a number of years, compared with the broader financial services sector. But certainly in the last few years, I think there's been a bit of an element of catch up. I'd like to think at BGL we've been sort of leading the way there for a quite a period. I'd certainly echo Stu's comments in that there has been a definite sort of reticence in some areas for customers to adopt digital, particularly in the servicing area. As far as the purchasing cycle goes, I think that was quite heavily disrupted, a number of years back, particularly by price comparison. And I'd like to think that BGL played a significant role in that. But I think there's been a clear distinction in customer behaviour across purchase versus service. There's a number of factors in that. But I think we're starting to see some traction now, and that was the case pre-COVID and certainly more recently in the last year.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like absolutely exciting times for us, particularly the customers. So with that in mind then, Stuart, what have been some of the opportunities? You mentioned a couple in your first answer. What are some of the opportunities that insurers are going to start to see when it comes to digital experiences for their customers?
Well, I think what we've seen over the last nearly 9 to 12 months now with the pandemic is that we've got this entirely new cohort of customers that have been forced down the route of using digital technologies to go about their daily lives. So, we all know people that would never have even dreamed of doing their online shopping, for the groceries, that are now being forced to do that. There's people that have been forced to do their banking online that would have previously gone to a store. And people are now using platforms like Zoom and FaceTime to communicate with their families and friends. And we shouldn't underestimate the fact that the nation has been educated, and the digital savviness of the entire country has progressed massively over the last 9 months. And already we're seeing that have a massive impact in the way that people go about engaging with organisations, and insurance is certainly right at the forefront of that.
Excellent. Well, Barry, then I'm also really excited to hear your point of view on this one. With BGL Group, what have you seen during the pandemic, some of the digital experiences that have really resonated with your customers?
Yeah, and there's a slight irony here, right? I think BGL will probably, if not the absolute exception, one of the outliers in the way we've managed through the pandemic, in that we've managed to maintain our typical customer services almost without interruption. So we've seen less shift in customer behaviour directly as a result of the services we offer, because without being too smug about it, I think we've done such a great job of maintaining that service. However, again, I'll echo Stu's points in that we are seeing customers that we've struggled with for years to demonstrate to them the value of other service channels, digital service channels, recognizing there is value in that now because of their experiences elsewhere through other providers, similarly, whether it is through grocery shopping or their other financial service provision. So we're starting to see customers, outside of our sort of digital early adopter type cohorts, starting to take advantage of the services that we've provided to them. And I think also, broader than the services that we've offered traditionally in the digital space, so, online portals, we're seeing customers much more willing to engage for service needs through things like, messaging apps.
Oh, excellent. And well, Barry, if I could keep with you just for this next question. Now that you've got all these brand new customers using these digital tools, have you seen any new kind of key identifier as to what customers see as their most important part of a digital customer experience?
Again, I don't see anything, absolutely new. I think it's more a crystallization of the things we've always seen before, particularly with an insurance product. We have to be honest about this. It isn't a highly engaging product. So, this has been, I think, one of the key differentiators between insurance and other financial services and that adoption. So banking, as everyone knows, people engage with it much more frequently, and therefore are prepared to invest a little more time in learning and using new digital channels, whereas insurance is a much lower frequency contact product. For me, I think what we've seen is that emphasis on customers wanting to do their job. They want their job done. They want it done simply. They want it done clearly, and they want it done with a high element of trust. And I think that trust thing has been one of the things that has come to the fore through the pandemic. So early on, we had contacts from customers who were wanting to flex their products to some degree because for example, they're not using their car as much as they were, etc. So whilst they're absolutely seeing the value of new digital services, there has to be that underlying sort of clarity and trust that the thing they're trying to do will be done for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting hearing about that kind of trust and flexibility. Stuart, could I also get your input on that? Would you say that those two pillars are key for you guys as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and Barry talked about the two different kind of, I guess, the phases, if you like, of the insurance journey. One is when I'm buying the product. And I think in that situation, people are just looking for reassurance that they're getting a good deal. They want the interaction to be handled as efficiently as possible. But I think quite often insurance can be quite a complex product, and there are often many different options that the customer needs to choose from. So I think there is an opportunity for insurers, and we've seen this a lot in banking in particular, but for insurers to leverage digital channels alongside voice to visualize the products that are on offer to the customer and help them to have a clear understanding about what it is they're buying. Banking has been really successful around this and has seen some quite significant uplifts in terms of resell and cross-sell opportunity through doing this. And I think this is particularly interesting and important now that more and more people are at home. They've got screens in front of them. Their contacts are being initiated, through a screen, but often via the telephone. So how do we take advantage of that screen to provide an extra tool to the people in the call centre, the agents in the call centre, to help the customer understand more clearly what it is they're buying? And then if you then look at the claims part of the journey, that's very different. And we've seen this a lot through COVID, where the telephone usage has increased quite significantly over the last 9 months across all different sectors. And mainly that's because customers want reassurance. They want to speak to somebody, and they want confidence that they are their problem is being solved and taken seriously, and that's really relevant to the claims part of the journey. So I think that's the opportunity really to emphasize the value of the claims part of the journey. That's where the customer crystallizes the value that they're buying in terms of insurance, and I think that's where you can keep the customer informed, keep them updated as to what's going on, understand where they are in the process, and as Barry said, leverage messaging channels to really give that customer reassurance around the progress that you're making around resolving their case.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point hearing about how the telephone is actually now back on the rise as a form of what was seen as being quite an impersonal kind of way of interacting, is now actually become a really nice way to connect with a customer and provide that value add. So Barry, with that in mind, going forward, what are some new touch points that in an innovation side of things we're going to start seeing customers interact with their insurer? You mentioned messaging apps. Are we going to see a continuation of that innovation going forward in insurance?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've seen, this predates the pandemic, but has been emphasised more, is the value of using multiple modes or media in customer service. We've had some areas that have always been traditionally quite difficult to explain to customers by phone in a very traditional sense. So we're seeing real value in being able to combine those two things within an experience for a customer. So maybe an experience that starts in the telephone that may be partially serviced through a messaging app, for example, sharing complex information rather than trying to explain it to customers, but how to visually display information. We're seeing real value in that, and those are the sort of areas where customers equally are appreciating the advantage of it. It doesn't feel to them, and it isn't intended to be this way. But I think in the past, some of those attempts that have been made have felt like deliberate channel shift efforts to customers, and they've resisted it. Whereas I think customers are adopting technology in a different way now, recognizing that it's bringing value to them in the experience and not just value to the organization.
Definitely. And with that in mind, kind of keeping this forward-thinking viewpoint, Stuart, could I get you to chime back in terms of from the innovation side of things? Maybe a kind of crystal ball type question here. What kind of touch points are you going to see? Do you think we're going to see in insurance become more prevalent in the future?
So I think, just building on some of the points that Barry was making there, there's been this long standing vision, if you like, that a lot of people put under the omni-channel banner, which is that customers should be able to have any touch point and do anything on any channel. I actually disagree there. I think we've got to think about the most appropriate way that we communicate as humans. We speak faster than we can type, and we listen, or we read faster than we can listen, and we're able to absorb lots of information very quickly through visual means, and that's much harder to do that often via the telephone or via voice. So we have to think about designing experiences that take advantage of all the different benefits that those channels have to offer. And I think Barry's point around using messaging to get across complex information is really important. Maybe just giving customers alerts through that channel, using voice where it's appropriate, where the customer needs reassurance, and then overlaying digital channels on top of that to allow people to visualize and absorb information quickly. So for me, it's not about having all of these services available concurrently in all channels. It's about taking advantage and using those different touch points where appropriate. And I think video will play a part of that going forward as well. But for me, that's the future of the way that organisations will communicate with their customers.
I just second that, really. I think that having a degree of control over the communication method from the organisation side is absolutely key. It isn't about taking control away from customers. It's about recognising what's going to be the most effective.
And I think that's so interesting, hearing how customer experience has changed from just this kind of applying the nicest strategy to your customers to actually getting down to the science of what a customer really wants and how they like to be treated. It's really getting into quite exciting territory. And as a visual learner, I quite enjoy hearing the fact that we're going to start seeing a lot more stuff shown to us rather than just spoken with. Well, with that in mind, Barry, especially BGL Group, as you said, people might not have heard of it, but you cover a lot of different people, a lot of different brands. When it comes to these large institutions, we always hear about insurtechs being very quick and agile to implement these brand new customer experience innovations, but are we being a bit unfair there? Do the large institutions, large insurers actually have an advantage when it comes to customer experience because of maybe the way things had been done in the past?
I think I guess the answer is a bit of both. I think certainly, the insurance industry has been slow to move. I think, there's a number of factors there, lots and lots of legacy technologies. I think we're sort of somewhere in the middle of this range at BGL, but you speak to some of the really long established general insurers. They've got, through merger and acquisition, hundreds of different technologies in the stack. Makes it very difficult. There is a natural risk aversion, I guess, in the industry as well. So that's certainly true. But I think equally, there is an element here which is about customer choice. And I think, if you look at some of the fintech and insurtech startups have brought radical new products or service models to market, they've had an appeal, but they've had generally a relatively small appeal in terms of overall market share. Yeah. And I think that's, a little bit of customer self-selection, in that the customers that are used to dealing with big established players in the financial services market are electing to engage with those organizations, partly out of trust, brand recognition, etc., but also out of familiarity with service provision. So I think it's, we talked about this earlier on, there is certainly a degree of customer adoption of these things, which I think is one of the reasons some of the more established organizations haven't moved so far, so quickly, and been so radical with what they're offering, because there's an element of I think of customer education that says, yes, you can still get, or you'll get an even better service if you do it this way, but without spooking customers into that. And I think there's both elements there.
I like the use of the word spook, because it loops back to what you were saying earlier about how key trust is in insurance. And I think that's something that maybe the larger insurers can rely on, and their customers can too. So Stuart, can I also get your input as well? Would you agree that maybe it's been a bit of a give and take in this quite unconventional time?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the advantage that the more established insurers have is the contact center, in the background, which enables that human interaction with people, which I think has really come to the forefront over the last 9 months. We've never seen the customer service department, the contact center, be seen as such a strategic asset to engage with engage with customers, and it's been featured at board level conversations. Exec members are really keen to understand the level of service that's being delivered, particularly in that transition to home working. So seeing the contact centre as a strategic asset, I think, is definitely something that the more established providers have had. And I think the other side to that is the perception that digital interactions mean that humans get taken completely out of the loop is something we need to really think about as well. Because from my perspective, digital is really just a set of tools that enable you to enhance the interaction. And yes, some of those interactions can take place without human involved, but really, embedding humans in that process and making sure they're there to step in when needed, and leveraging digital technologies to enable the humans in the loop to do a much better job, really is where we should be thinking about digital going forward. And I think that's where, as I say, the established providers have got a real advantage.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, hearing how the digital means and potentially artificial intelligence can just streamline the process and help the customer experience officers working out. So, I mean, with that in mind, and Stuart, you did bring up the fact that the pandemic means that people are working from home. Do you think that customer experience is only going to become more important, and executive boards are actually going to look at the very way that customer experience has been conducted at a much more kind of intricate detail?
Yeah, I think, one thing that we have learned from the pandemic is that people will be engaging remotely to do many, many more things, and that includes the way that they interact with organisations. The guys at BGL did an amazing job of that shift to home working, and home working will definitely be a key part of the mix going forward. I think what we need to do now is appreciate that the people that are working at home are often working on, smaller screens. We need to design the experiences for the people that are sat at home so they've got the information at their fingertips to deliver a better service back to customers. So that means thinking about design not just from a customer-facing website perspective, but thinking about design from an agent user interface perspective and really focusing on that. So yeah, I think there are many lessons that we can learn from what's taken place over the last 9 months, and home working will be a key part of that, no doubt.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about how you're having to really restructure the whole way that people just interact with the visual kind of materials that you provide. So Barry, with that in mind, Stuart was singing your praises there about the move to home working and for BGL. And so, what does that mean for kind of insurance going forward, call centers and your customers as well?
Yeah, I mean, we surprised ourselves, with the pace at which we made that change. We like most organisations, were firmly of the view that home working wasn't a particularly attractive or even viable model for a contact centre, but circumstances, forced us to rethink that. So we very rapidly made that shift. Some of the things that Stuart's described there are absolutely true. Recognising the different challenges that call centre workers have when they're doing their role from home. Some of it about physical hardware. Certainly things about what's going on around them in their home life. I mean, my dog just nearly appeared on screen a moment or two ago. That's okay for us. We can manage that. It's perhaps a little trickier for someone who's got a customer on the end of a contact with a sort of highly emotional situation they're dealing with, perhaps. So there are different challenges, but equally there brings opportunity. I think, like I say, we're proud of what we achieved during that rapid switch from entirely office-based to at one point 100% home-based, and maintaining that contact centre service, almost without any interruption at all. And we saw great feedback from customers. So I think it's an interesting one. As a society, I think there's been a shift. I think people aren't surprised now as customers if they call a contact centre and hear a child in the background, for example, because they recognise there are large proportions of the population working at home. Yeah. So I think there's real opportunity in it for us. I think it brings us as a contact centre operation, a whole new operating model. Potentially, and that's certainly right at the front of our thinking now, that says it's not just about technology, it's about how you work with people, the different people you can attract into your organisation, and the servicing opportunities that brings that we can bring to customers with where live contact still preferred.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up that anecdote of the child in the background, because it wasn't insurance, it was for banking, but I phoned a contact centre and it increased the personality, the personable kind of interaction. It felt like I was speaking to a human. They, had the same issues. So, I mean, that weirdly, it went a long way to improving the customer experience, because I felt like I was being interacted with someone, even though I wasn't in a branch, which is an interesting little, kind of change that I would never have predicted.
It definitely humanises the experience, that's for sure.
Exactly, yeah. With that in mind then, Stuart, we've heard about these opportunities from Barry just then. How can insurers future-proof themselves when innovations are coming in at rapid pace and the constantly changing customer demand? What would you say to insurers around the world with that innovation mindset?
So I think, again, one of the advantages that the established insurers have is that they have access to huge amounts of data, and I think data will be a really key differentiator, particularly in the insurance sector across all different areas. But the interactions that have taken place historically and that take place in real time now, there's a huge amount of value in the data that exists within those interactions. And I think the insurers that are going to succeed in the future are going to be the ones that really find a way to tap into that data, both historically and real time, to nudge the customer or nudge the employee, the agent in the call centre, for example, or support them, with real time interactions. And we're doing a lot of work with a lot of insurers, BGL being right at the forefront of this, in terms of using AI, using machine learning, tapping into the conversations that are taking place in real time with customers, both up front, actually, before the call hits the organisation, before it hits the call centre, and actually the interaction as it takes place in real time. And then using that information, using models in the background to understand what the customer's intent is, understand what they're looking to achieve, and presenting information to allow the agent to advise the customer, providing them with the right amount of knowledge, next best actions and those types of things. So I think really it's that use of data that will allow the more forward-thinking insurers to be able to differentiate themselves, drive better efficiencies, deliver more personalised experiences to customers, and ultimately, succeed in and leverage innovation going forward.
How do you increase customer stickiness if customers are now moving between organizations more because it's become more acceptable to kind of look for the best and easier to kind of switch now that you don't have to go into a branch or spend ages because customer experience has gotten so easy? How do you increase that customer stickiness? Sorry.
I think we're heading into a period where customer stickiness may become a bit more inherent anyway. If service is good, I tend to think with perhaps certainly in our product area, not necessarily true across all financial services or even all insurance products, but especially in the private motor and home area, I think we're probably, if we haven't already reached the peak of customer shopping around and churn. We're getting close to that. I think there's some other factors in the market that we're probably all aware of that are going to impact that over the next sort of 12, 18, 24 months anyway. And I think that's a really fantastic opportunity for those of us that are kind of customer experience enthusiasts, really, because I think up until now, certainly in those heavily commoditized market areas, customer experience has had less value than we would have liked it because it's been so much price-based. Customers are prepared to take a punt on receiving poor service if the price is right. Yeah. Whereas I think with price becoming less of a differentiator in the future, CX will become, king, or certainly close to king. So I think there's real opportunity for us to, further cement customer stickiness by getting the experience right. And I think bringing that range of services to customers to be able to deliver service through the right channel in the right way in the moment when it really counts is going to be the real opportunity for us to retain customers.
Well, I mean, that's a really brilliant kind of way to start wrapping up, actually, Barry, thinking about how customer experience, the title, what I framed the discussion as was, customer experience in the time of COVID. Going forward, it sounds like customer experience because of COVID is going to become, as you said, king. Stuart, can I get your input on that? Do you think that customer experience is really going to become the differentiator between brands going forward?
I think it will do. I mean, it always has to some extent, but clearly that varies across different sectors. And I think Barry's point is that, insurance for many years now, it has been about price. Comparison websites have kind of driven that behaviour in customers. But I think, the pandemic has changed a lot of things. I think there is now a much, much stronger opportunity for all organisations, but particularly those in the insurance sector and financial services, to leverage digital tools, but embed service in those digital experiences and deliver a differentiated experience and put customer service and customer experience at the forefront of the decisions that people make when they select to work with an organisation. So, I do think it's the time now for customer service to differentiate, and that doesn't mean delivering outstanding customer service on every different touch point. I think it means about understanding what the customer wants from the sales part of the journey, from the service part of the journey, and then delivering an appropriate experience that leverages all of the different channels available to make sure the customer's getting what they need in the most efficient way possible.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that input, guys. I think that's all we have time for. And thank you very much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much about, really the future of customer experience and where it started. And as a customer myself, that's really exciting for me to hear. So thank you very much. Thank you also to our viewers. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com and of course, YouTube and LinkedIn. So thanks very much and I'll see you next time.